The year was 2264, and humanity had finally stepped into the galaxy. Earth's colonies stretched across the Moon, Mars, Titan, and even small outposts scattered through the asteroid belt. They were still young and fragile settlements, but they gave humanity something priceless: hope that they were no longer bound to a single planet. Ships built in orbital docks cruised through the inner system. Some carried minerals, others settlers, and some served as patrol craft to keep order among the trade routes. Compared to the great powers that roamed the stars, humanity's fleet was small and weak. Yet, for the first time in history, people began to believe they were part of something greater than themselves. A united Terran civilization. That fragile dream ended the day the Volari arrived. They came without warning. A colossal ship appeared at the edge of Earth's system. It was not built like any human vessel. Its surface glowed faintly with violet light, smooth as glass, curving like a blade in the dark. The ship was longer than the tallest cities on Earth, bristling with towers and weapon ports that humans could not name. At first, scientists argued about what it might be. Some thought it was a new comet. Others believed it might be an abandoned relic from some ancient race. But then the transmission came, clear and merciless. A voice spoke across every channel in every language as though it had studied humanity for centuries. This system belongs now to the Volari Dominion. You are to kneel, submit, and pay tribute. Refuse and your species will be erased. You have 7 days to decide. The words froze the world. On Earth, leaders rushed into emergency councils. Presidents, prime ministers, and generals argued about what should be done. Some shouted that it was impossible to resist. The Volari ship was too powerful, too alien, and too far beyond human understanding. Others refused to surrender, pointing to centuries of history where humanity had endured invasion, war, and hardship but had never bowed forever to conquerors. In the streets of Earth's cities, panic spread. News networks replayed the Volari message endlessly. Fear filled the air. But mixed with fear came anger, and anger brought unity. Captain Elias Kane, commander of the Terran frigate Resolute, sat in his chair aboard the small vessel stationed near Ceres in the asteroid belt. His crew watched the same message repeat on their screens. Kane was a veteran of Earth's early space wars, a man who had seen humans fight for scraps of territory in orbit, back when space was only a dream. He knew one thing for certain: surrender meant death of the spirit even if bodies were spared. "We can't bow to them," Kane said quietly to his officers. "If we kneel today, we'll kneel forever. We have one chance. Fight back and prove that we're not prey." His words carried the weight of truth. Around the system, other captains and commanders felt the same fire rise in their hearts. The Volari Dominion did not wait long to prove their strength. On the third day after their ultimatum, a patrol fleet of 3 Volari warships entered the asteroid belt. Their purpose was clear: to show humanity what defiance would cost. Each Volari ship dwarfed human vessels. They moved with eerie precision, their hulls glowing with energy fields that shrugged off asteroid impacts. They scanned human mining stations as though cataloging resources, not people. When the Volari ships came too close to the mining colonies, Captain Kane made his choice. He ordered Resolute and 2 other small human frigates to intercept. The crew knew what this meant. Against Volari warships, their ships were little more than toys. But fear could not rule them now. Humanity had always survived by daring to fight against impossible odds. The battle began in silence, as most space battles did. The human frigates darted among the rocks, using the asteroid belt as cover. They fired railguns and missile swarms, weapons crude compared to the Volari's glowing beams. But what they lacked in technology, they made up for in cunning. The Volari ships responded with brutal power. Beams of violet light lanced across the belt, shattering asteroids into clouds of molten dust. One human frigate, the Valor, took a direct hit and vanished in a flash of fire. But Kane did not falter. He ordered his ship to dive into the asteroid field, weaving through rock and debris. The Volari beams were powerful, but they could not bend around obstacles. The asteroids themselves became humanity's armor. Then came the moment that changed history. The 3rd human frigate, Ardent, sacrificed itself by ramming into the lead Volari ship. Its engines overloaded, releasing a fireball that cracked open the alien vessel's shields for the first time. Kane seized the chance. "Fire everything we've got," he shouted. The Resolute unleashed a storm of missiles, every last warhead they had left. They struck the weakened Valari ship in rapid bursts, one after another, until the great vessel cracked apart. Flames and debris spun into the void, the first Valari warship destroyed by human hands. For a long moment, the battlefield went silent. The other Valari ships hesitated, as though stunned that their kind could be defeated by such fragile creatures. Then, without explanation, they withdrew. Humanity had won its first victory. The news spread like wildfire across Earth and the colonies. People who had wept in fear only days before now cheered in the streets. For the first time, they believed the impossible. The Valari could be beaten. Of course, the Valari did not see it that way. To them, this was no true battle, only a test. And humanity, instead of submitting, had dared to strike. The Dominion would not forgive. They would return with fleets vast enough to scour every planet bare. But humanity had already made its choice. At the United Terran Council on Earth, leaders signed a new pact, the Terran Defense Accord. All nations, all colonies, all fleets would stand as one. No more divisions, no more rivalries. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would fight. And so began the war that would reshape the galaxy. The Valari had given their ultimatum. Humanity had answered, not with surrender, not with silence, but with fire. The destruction of the Valari patrol in the asteroid belt became a story told in every corner of the Terran colonies. People on Mars painted murals of the frigate Resolute standing defiant against the massive alien warships. Children on Earth spoke the names of Captain Elias Kane and the crew of Ardent as though they were ancient heroes. For the first time, humanity did not feel like prey among the stars, but victory brought no safety. The Valari Dominion was not an empire that forgot insult or defeat. To them, humanity was no longer a curiosity to be catalogued. They were vermin that needed to be burned out of existence. On the 7th day after the ultimatum, as the Valari had promised, their response came. 3 fleets emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Sol system. Each fleet held more ships than humanity possessed in total. Their arrival was not hidden. Every telescope, every listening station, and every radar array lit up with alarms. On Mars, the red sky filled with streaks of light as Valari bombardment began. Orbital defenses, still primitive compared to alien technology, fired desperately, but the beams of violet energy cut through them like paper. Whole cities vanished in blinding flashes. Colonies that had taken generations to build were gone in minutes. On Titan, the outer colonies fared no better. The Valari did not negotiate, did not land troops, and did not ask for surrender again. They came only to destroy. Millions died in the first wave. The Terran Defense Accord gathered an emergency session. Leaders who had once argued for peace now sat in silence, faces pale with shock. But there was no more choice left. Humanity had been shown the Dominion's answer. "We cannot fight them ship to ship," Admiral May Yara said as she stood before the council. Her voice was steady, though her eyes were heavy with grief. "Their fleets are larger, faster, and stronger. But they do not know our home. They do not know the asteroids, the gravity wells, the hidden orbits. If we fight with their rules, we are finished. But if we fight with ours, we can make them bleed." Thus began the birth of the guerrilla war. The minds turned to weapons. In the asteroid belt, engineers and miners became soldiers. Ore haulers were stripped down and armored with scavenged plating. Mining lasers were converted into crude weapons. Cargo freighters were fitted with missile racks and railguns. What had once carried food and supplies now carried death. Captain Elias Kane saw his small fleet grow. Where once he had commanded only the Resolute, now dozens of converted ships swarmed under his banner. They were not pretty, nor were they powerful, but they were fast and clever. Humanity's strength was not in raw firepower, but in its will to adapt. Valari fleets swept through the system, hunting these improvised warships. But time and again the hunters became the hunted. In one battle near Vesta, Kane's fleet lured a squadron of Valari destroyers into a dense asteroid cluster. Human ships darted between the rocks, laying mines and decoys. The destroyers, unable to maneuver in such tight space, were forced to slow down. That was when the Terrans struck, missiles and railguns tearing into them from all sides. 2 Valari ships were destroyed, and the rest fled with heavy damage. The victory cost humanity ships and lives, but it sent a message. The Dominion was not invincible here. The price of defiance, yet every victory came with heavy loss. On Mars, Survivors hid in the ruins of cities, living in tunnels dug deep beneath the surface. They called themselves the Ash Children, for their world's skies were filled with ash from burning colonies. They sent messages into the void, promising that Mars would rise again when the time came. On Titan, scattered outposts tried to resist, but the Volari struck mercilessly. When a human strike team destroyed a Volari supply base, the Dominion answered by burning 3 Titan colonies to the ground. Families across Earth watched the broadcasts in horror. They wept for their lost brothers and sisters, but the grief only hardened their resolve. Across the system, volunteers lined up to serve in the Terran fleets. Scientists worked night and day to crack Volari technology. Factories turned from building farm equipment to building weapons. For the first time in human history, there were no nations, only one people. The captured ship. The turning point came with the capture of a Volari cruiser. It happened in the Outer Belt, where Kane and his fleet ambushed a small convoy. Most Volari ships were destroyed in the ambush, but one cruiser was crippled instead of annihilated. Kane ordered his ships not to finish it. Instead, boarding teams stormed the vessel, fighting room by room against the alien crew. The Volari were tall, with pale skin and eyes like molten gold. They fought with strange energy weapons, and their language was harsh and cold. But the Terrans were desperate and fearless. In the end, the humans took the ship. Inside, they found something that chilled their blood. The Volari ship was not only a war vessel, it was a prison. In its lower decks, hundreds of alien beings were held in cages. Thin, broken, and afraid, they represented dozens of species humanity had never seen before. Each wore collars of control. Some were too weak to move. Others stared blankly as though their spirits had been crushed long ago. When Kane's men freed them, the prisoners fell to their knees, not in worship, but in disbelief. For generations, no one had ever defied the Volari and lived. Yet here were humans, fragile creatures from a world the Dominion had thought beneath notice, standing victorious. Among the prisoners was an alien elder named Seroth, from a species once proud but long enslaved. He told Kane the truth of the Volari Dominion. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, not by strength alone, but by fear. World after world had submitted, believing resistance was hopeless. Those who rebelled had been destroyed, their stories erased. "You are the first," Seroth whispered. "The first to fight and to win. If the others hear of this, they will rise." The broadcast Kane knew the words were true. Humanity had not only captured a Volari ship, they had captured a story. The Terran Defense Accord made a bold choice. They took the evidence of the prisoners, the recordings of battles, and the images of destroyed colonies, and they broadcast them into the stars. Every signal buoy, every long-range array, every captured Volari channel carried the same message. "We are humanity. The Volari came to make us kneel. We refused. They burned our worlds, but we still stand. To all who suffer under their chains, you are not alone. Fight, and you will not fight alone." The message echoed across the galaxy. On distant worlds, slaves in chains whispered of the humans. On forgotten colonies, broken races lifted their heads and dared to dream of freedom. The Dominion laughed at the idea that such a small species could inspire rebellion, but cracks were already forming in their empire. Fire spreads, the Volari High Council raged. They sent more fleets, larger and deadlier. They ordered the total cleansing of human space. But the more they pressed, the more determined humanity became. Each human loss was mourned, but each loss became a seed of defiance. For every colony burned, a dozen new ships rose from the shipyards of Earth. For every city destroyed, 10,000 new volunteers joined the fight. The Volari had expected humanity to bow. Instead, they had lit a fire, and that fire was spreading. The war was no longer a question of survival alone. It had become something greater. Humanity was no longer fighting just for themselves. They were fighting for every species that had been silenced, for every world that had been broken, for every child who had grown up in chains. The Volari had wanted submission. What they had created instead was rebellion. The spark had been struck, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The capture of the Volari cruiser and the great broadcast that followed changed everything. Humanity had been fighting only for survival. Now the galaxy itself began to watch them. For the first time in ages, the Dominion's chains felt weaker. Whispers of rebellion grew louder, but whispers alone could not win a war. The Valari Dominion answered the human defiance with fury. Their fleets doubled in number around Sol System. Their war councils declared that humanity was to be erased so thoroughly that no trace of their species would remain. To the Valari, humans were not equals in battle. They were insects that had bitten too deeply. Yet insects could swarm, and swarms could kill. A war of shadows. The Terran Defense Accord understood they could not match the Dominion ship for ship. Humanity's fleets were smaller, weaker, and lacked the vast reserves of the Dominion. But humans had two things the Valari did not: imagination and desperation. Admiral Mayara oversaw the coordination of scattered fleets from Earth's orbit. On the maps that filled her command center, Valari fleets appeared as glowing storms of violet. Against them, human fleets were only small dots, fragile and scattered. Yet those small dots kept striking, vanishing, and striking again. Terran fleets learned to fight in the shadows. They hid in asteroid fields in the magnetic storms of Jupiter, or beneath the ice of comets. Valari fleets would sweep past searching for them, only to be ambushed at the worst possible moment. In one battle near Saturn, the Valari launched a massive assault against what they believed was a Terran base. When they arrived, the base turned out to be empty, its surface filled with decoys. Hidden ships in the rings of Saturn opened fire, scattering the Valari fleet in confusion. By the time they regrouped, half their ships were gone. The galaxy began to whisper a new phrase. The humans strike from nowhere. A weapon. Born of necessity, human scientists worked tirelessly to turn scraps of Valari technology into weapons. The captured cruiser became a floating laboratory, studied day and night. What once had been alien mysteries became blueprints for survival. Dr. Amara Solari, one of Earth's brightest engineers, was among the team that cracked the secret of the Valari energy shields. Humanity could not copy them fully, but they discovered a way to disrupt them. By overloading missile warheads with specific frequencies, they created a weapon that could punch holes through the once invincible barriers. The first test came during a raid near Europa. Kane's Resolute fired a spread of the new disruptor torpedoes. For a moment, the Valari shield shimmered, flickered, and then collapsed. Human railguns tore through the exposed hull. The mighty alien cruiser exploded, and with it the myth of invulnerability. When news of this spread, hope became fire. Rebellion ignites. On a world far beyond Sol, the enslaved Cathari people rose up. They were a bird-like species whose wings had long been clipped by Valari overseers. For centuries, they had been forced to mine the toxic minerals of their homeworld. When they saw the human broadcast, they dared to believe they could rise. Their rebellion was small at first, only a handful of workers seizing weapons from their masters. But when word of humanity's victories reached them, thousands joined. The Valari garrison burned, and for the first time in generations, the Cathari saw the sky free of their chains. On another world, the reptilian Durnak, who had lived under Valari slavery for centuries, refused to work their mines. They shouted the human words across their camps, "We will not kneel." The Dominion crushed many of these rebellions with brutal force, but the damage was done. For every rebellion put down, two more began. The galaxy was changing. Humanity learns to burn back. The Terran Accord made a bold decision. No longer would they only defend. Humanity would take the war into Valari space. The first offensive came against a Valari supply station orbiting a barren world in the outer reaches. Human fleets arrived in silence, drifting on minimal power to avoid detection. When they struck, it was swift and merciless. The supply lines that fed Valari fleets burned. Again and again, Terran fleets hit Valari worlds, outposts, and shipyards. They did not conquer these places. They burned them, denied them, shattered the Dominion's reach piece by piece. Captain Elias Kane, aboard the Resolute, led one such raid deep into enemy space. The Valari colony they struck had been used as a training ground for soldiers. Kane's fleet tore through it, not to slaughter civilians, but to destroy the war machines being built there. The sight of Valari worlds aflame shocked the Dominion. For so long they had been the hunters. Now they were hunted. Pride against fury, the Valari Council could not comprehend humanity's success. Their fleets were still larger, their weapons still stronger. Yet again and again they suffered defeats at the hands of this fragile species. Pride blinded them. Instead of adapting, they grew furious. Valari admirals insisted on larger fleets, more overwhelming firepower. But large fleets were slow, predictable, and easy prey for Terran ambushes. One Valari commander, Admiral Theral, warned the Council that humanity fought differently. "They are like fire," he said. "Stamp on it and it spreads. Starve it and it dies. We must adapt." The Council silenced him. They believed humanity would break soon enough. They were wrong. The Battle of Kepler Gate. The true test came at Kepler Gate, a massive Valari-built structure used to move fleets across the stars. If the Terrans could destroy it, they would cripple Dominion reinforcements. The battle was brutal. Valari defenders numbered in the hundreds, while the Terran fleet had less than 50 ships. But Kane and Admiral Mayara devised a plan. They lured the Valari into chasing decoy ships toward the gravity well of the nearby gas giant. The pull of the giant slowed the Valari ships, making them vulnerable. Terran fleet struck from behind, focusing all fire on the gate itself. As the battle raged, Kane's Resolute was heavily damaged. Fires tore through its corridors. But Kane refused to retreat. With his last surviving torpedoes, he targeted the gate's central core. The explosion lit the sky like a second sun. The Kepler Gate collapsed in on itself, tearing apart half the Valari fleet caught nearby. The rest scattered in chaos. Humanity had not only survived, they had dealt a blow that shook the entire Dominion. The galaxy takes notice. The destruction of the Kepler Gate was felt across the stars. For the first time in 1,000 years, a major Valari stronghold had fallen. Enslaved races rejoiced in secret. Some openly declared rebellion. To many, humanity became more than a species, they became a symbol. They were the fire that refused to die. On Earth, though, there was no celebration. The price of victory was written in names. Thousands of names etched into the walls of the Terran Council chambers. Families wept for those lost, but they also lifted their heads with pride. For every fallen soldier, 10 more volunteered. Factories rang day and night, building new warships. Scientists unlocked more secrets of Valari technology. The war was no longer only about survival. It was about freedom. Fire spreads the Valari Dominion, once unquestioned, now faced cracks in every direction. Their fleets were stretched thin. Their colonies rebelled. Their enemies struck from the shadows. And at the heart of it all was a single truth they could no longer deny. Humanity had lit a fire. That fire was spreading across the galaxy, unstoppable, untamable, and unending. And though the Valari still possessed the strength of an empire, they began to understand something they had never imagined. They could lose. The fall of the Kepler Gate sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For centuries, the Valari Dominion had been unchallenged, their rule unquestioned. But now their strength seemed uncertain. Fleets that once moved without fear hesitated. Colonies that once bowed without thought began to whisper of freedom. And at the center of this storm was humanity. What had begun as desperate defense now turned into daring offense. The Terran Defense Accord had decided it was not enough to wait for the Valari to strike. To survive, humanity had to take the war to the enemy. The call to arms in the command chamber above Earth. Admiral Mayara stood before the gathered leaders of the Accord. Around her, holograms of fleet captains and council members flickered in the air. "Our people are strong," she began. "We have endured Mars, we have endured Titan. We have struck them in the shadows. But the Dominion will not stop until every one of us is gone. We cannot win this war by hiding. We must fight where they believe themselves strongest, on their own worlds." The room went silent. To attack the Dominion itself was unthinkable. Yet the fire of recent victories burned in every heart. Slowly, one by one, the Council agreed. The decision was made. Humanity would launch its first true offensive. Into Valari space, the Terran fleets gathered near Jupiter, assembling more warships than had ever been seen together in human history. Freighters converted into carriers, mining rigs armed with cannons, and sleek new cruisers built with stolen Valari designs, all prepared for the journey. Among them was the Resolute. Scarred from countless battles, yet still standing, Captain Elias Kane walked her decks, greeting the fresh recruits who now filled her halls. Many were young, barely old enough to have seen the stars. Their faces were filled with fear and determination. Kane spoke to them not as soldiers, but as people. "You know why you're here," he told them. "The Valari think they can burn our worlds. Today we show them the truth. Today we carry the fire back to them." Cheers rose from the crew. Whatever fear they felt was swallowed by the unity of purpose. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, leaving Sol behind. Their destination, the Valari colony of Zerath Prime, a major shipyard that supplied half the Dominion's fleets in the region. The Battle of Zerath Prime was no fragile outpost. It was a fortress world, with orbital defenses thicker than anything humanity had faced before. Valari warships patrolled its skies, confident in their invulnerability. But the Terran fleet did not arrive with brute force. They arrived with strategy. Admiral Yara split the fleet into 3 groups. One would lure the Valari defenders into open space. Another would cut off reinforcements. The third, led by Kane and the Resolute, would strike directly at the shipyards. The trap unfolded with precision. Decoy fleets sent false signals, drawing Valari squadrons away. When the Dominion finally realized the deception, it was too late. Human warships were already among their shipyards, missiles and disruptor torpedoes raining down. The sky above Zerath Prime became fire. Valari ships rushed to defend, but the Terrans fought with ruthless coordination. Shields collapsed under disruptor waves and railguns tore into exposed hulls. Kane's Resolute weaved between towering shipyard frames, destroying half-completed warships before they could launch. For the first time, a Valari world burned. The people of Zerath Prime, long confident in their empire, looked up to see their sky filled with explosions. For the first time, they knew fear. The cost of fire victory was not without sacrifice. Half the Terran fleet was lost in the battle. Brave ships that had carried colonists and cargo in gentler days were now wrecks drifting in orbit. Thousands of lives were gone. On the Resolute, fires tore through her lower decks. Kane himself fought alongside his crew to keep the ship alive. When the battle ended, the shipyard was rubble, but the Resolute barely limped away, her hull scorched and her engines failing. As the fleet retreated, Admiral Yara gave the order that echoed through every channel: let it be known. Humanity does not hide. Humanity does not kneel. Humanity burns back. The Dominion trembles. News of Zerath Prime's fall spread faster than light. For centuries, the Valari had been the hammer that crushed rebellion. Now their own worlds were under siege. In the Valari High Council chambers, panic stirred. Some demanded the total destruction of humanity, even if it cost entire fleets. Others quietly began to doubt. Admiral Thural, the one who had warned that humans fought differently, stood again before the council. "They are not like the others," he said. "We thought them weak. We were wrong. They do not fight for survival alone, they fight for freedom, and freedom spreads faster than fear." The council dismissed him once more, but unease lingered. Flames of rebellion, the fire humanity had lit, now spread across the galaxy. On distant worlds, slaves rose in open revolt. The Kithari built weapons from mining tools and stormed their overseers. The Durnak tore down the factories where they had labored for generations. Other species, long silent, now lifted their voices. They painted human symbols on their walls, raised human banners in their streets, and shouted human words in their uprisings. "We will not kneel." Though many rebellions were crushed, the Dominion was stretched thinner and thinner. Every fleet sent to suppress a revolt was a fleet not hunting humans. Every battle lost chipped away at the illusion of Valari dominance. Humanity's transformation back on Earth. The war changed everything. Cities that had once been divided by nations now worked as one. Shipyards in orbit grew larger, faster, and more advanced. Factories turned out fleets with designs that mixed human creativity and Valari science. What had once been a scattered species of colonists was now an empire in its own right, the Terran Accord. Not an empire of conquest, but of unity, forged in fire. Children grew up hearing the names of fallen heroes, promising they would one day take their place. Farmers became pilots, miners became engineers. Humanity itself was becoming a warrior people. The Valari homeworld fears far across the stars. The Valari homeworld itself began to fear. The council chambers that had once spoken only of dominance now spoke of survival. "Humanity spreads like flame," one counselor whispered. "If we do not crush them soon, they will reach us." But even as they spoke, fleets returned broken, colonies fell silent, and rebellions spread. For the first time in their long rule, the Valari faced something they could not control. Not a weapon. Not an enemy fleet, but an idea. The idea that no empire was eternal. The idea that freedom was worth fighting for. The idea that even the weakest could stand against the strongest. And it was humanity who had carried that idea into the stars. Worlds aflame, from Sol to the farthest Valari colonies. The galaxy was aflame. Human fleets struck deeper, burning shipyards, liberating worlds, and proving that the Dominion could bleed. The Valari had once told humanity to kneel. Now they looked into the fire and began to wonder if they had awakened something they could never put out. The war was far from over. The Valari still had fleets beyond counting, weapons humanity could not yet imagine, and the will to crush all opposition. But for the first time in history, the Empire trembled, and humanity, united and unbroken, marched forward with fire in their hands. The worlds of the Valari burned, and the galaxy watched in awe. The war had reached its final stage. For years, the Valari Dominion had ruled as if their power could never be broken. But now their fleets were scattered, their colonies burned, and their shipyards reduced to rubble. The galaxy whispered of rebellion, and everywhere that rebellion carried the name of humanity. The Terran Accord had grown from a desperate alliance into a rising empire. No longer did humanity fight only to survive. They fought to end the Dominion once and for all. And so came the boldest plan of all. The assault on the Valari homeworld itself. The gathering storm above Jupiter's moons. The greatest armada in human history assembled. Hundreds of ships, each scarred from countless battles, floated together. New warships built with hybrid human Valari technology gleamed beside older vessels patched with steel and willpower. From the command ship Resolute, Admiral May Yara stood before her officers. She was weary, her eyes lined by years of unending war, but her voice held steady strength. "This is the end," she told them. "The Valari will never forgive us, never accept us, never leave us in peace. So we must end them. Not with fear, but with fire. We will show the galaxy that no people should ever kneel again." Her words spread across the fleet, carried to every soldier, every pilot, every crew member. And in that moment, humanity was united not by fear, but by purpose. Captain Elias Kane stood on the bridge of the Resolute. His ship, though battered, had become a symbol of the war. The crew who followed him were no longer simple colonists or recruits, they were veterans, hardened by survival. "Set course," Kane said quietly. For the Valari homeworld, the stars shifted, engines roared. The fleet moved into the void, the road of fire. The path to the Valari homeworld was not unguarded. Entire fleets barred the way, massive warships bristling with weapons. The Valari still outnumbered the Terrans many times over, but humanity had learned. At the system of Carthys, the Terran fleet feigned retreat, drawing the Valari into an asteroid belt. Mines hidden among the rocks tore through their formation. At Elnar Gate, human ships used stolen codes to disable enemy defenses, striking before the Valari even knew they were there. Every battle cost lives. Every victory came with wreckage left behind. But still the fleet pressed on. The Valari began to realize the truth. Humanity could not be broken. The shadow of the homeworld. Finally, the fleet emerged at the edge of the Valari home system. Before them lay a sight no human had ever seen, a world of silver oceans and crystal towers ringed by vast orbital fortresses. This was the heart of the Dominion, the throne of their empire. The Valari Council had gathered every ship they could muster. Their armada filled the stars, a wall of firepower meant to crush all hope. On the bridge of the Resolute, silence fell as the enemy appeared on the sensors. Even the bravest felt the weight of the moment. "Looks like the whole galaxy is waiting for us," Kane muttered. Admiral Yara's voice cut through the quiet. "Then let's not keep them waiting. All ships, advance!" The final battle. The sky erupted. Valari warships surged forward, unleashing waves of plasma fire. Human vessels answered with railguns, disruptor torpedoes, and weapons born of desperate invention. The void became a storm of light, ships burning and breaking apart in every direction. The Resolute led the charge, weaving between enemy cruisers, blasting holes in their lines. But the Valari resisted with fury. Massive dreadnoughts bore down on the human fleet, their cannons tearing ships apart with every strike. For hours, the battle raged. The Valari outnumbered them, but the humans fought with unshakable determination. Every fallen comrade drove the survivors harder. Every destroyed shipyard, every burned colony, every lost life echoed in their minds. Admiral Yara gave the command that would decide the war. Break the line. Strike the planet. Fire on the homeworld human ships pierced through the enemy fleet. diving toward the Valari homeworld. Orbital fortresses opened fire, but were met with waves of torpedoes. One by one, the great stations erupted into flame. Kane and the Resolute led a squadron into low orbit. Below them stretched the shining cities of the Valari, towers glimmering in the sunlight. For centuries those towers had symbolized dominion. Now they trembled under the shadow of human guns. "Target the military complexes," Kane ordered. "We are not here to kill innocents. We are here to end their rule." Precision strikes tore through command centers, ship foundries, and fortress walls. Explosions lit the skies, and the once proud Valari world shuddered. On the ground, Valari civilians stared upward, watching their invincible empire crack before their eyes. The heart of the empire deep within the Valari capital, the High Council gathered for the last time. Their voices, once proud, were now filled with panic. "They will not stop," one counselor cried. "They will burn everything we built." "They already have," Admiral Thurell said quietly. The same voice who had warned them from the beginning. He looked around at the chamber where arrogance had blinded them. "We thought them weak. We thought them fragile. But they fight not for conquest but for freedom. And that makes them stronger than us." The chamber fell silent. Outside, the sound of war thundered ever closer. The cost of victory. The Valari fleet fought until the last. Their ships did not retreat. They died with their empire. Humanity paid dearly for every victory. Dozens of ships lost, thousands of lives gone. The Resolute itself was struck by a Valari dreadnought, her hull torn open, her engines failing. Kane stood on her bridge as alarms screamed around him. "We're not done yet," he growled. "Divert all power to weapons. One last strike." The Resolute surged forward, ramming into the dreadnought with every cannon firing. Both ships went down in fire, but the path to the Valari capital was opened. When the smoke cleared, the Dominion fleet was broken. The homeworld lay defenseless, the end of kneeling on the surface of the Valari capital. Admiral Yara broadcast across every channel, to every world in the Dominion, to every enslaved people and every free one. "This is not a war of destruction," she declared. "This is the end of tyranny. The Valari told us to kneel. We chose to rise. Let every world know humanity does not kneel. Humanity does not bow, and neither should you." Her words spread across the galaxy like fire. On distant worlds, chains were broken. Flags of rebellion were raised. The Dominion was no more. A galaxy forever changed. The war was over, but the cost was immense. Whole fleets lay in ruins. Entire colonies mourned their dead. The Resolute, symbol of the war, was gone. Yet humanity stood victorious. They had destroyed the mightiest empire the galaxy had ever known. They had not only saved themselves, but lit the spark of freedom across the stars. The galaxy would never forget the words that had carried them. They told humanity to kneel. Instead, we burned their worlds to dust, and from that dust a new age began.